whipped until her back was stripped to the bone. A cowboy lifted her onto his horse and gave her mercy. The flies found her before I did. That's the truth of it. I was maybe 100 yards out, picking my way along the dry creek bed where the alkali crust breaks under a horse's hoof if you don't watch, and I heard them before I saw her. That sound. A fat, ugly sound, the kind that hangs in August heat. I'd heard it over dead cattle, once over a man outside of Tucson who'd been 3 days in the sun. I pulled up. Cutter, my roan, the one with the notched ear, he felt it too. His whole body went tight like a pulled rope, and he stopped without me saying a word. He'd been my horse 11 years, and he knew when something was wrong with the world before I did. I sat there a minute. I'm not a man who rushes at things. Then I rode toward the sound. She was face down in the dirt maybe 20 feet from a patch of scrub juniper, and she was alive. I knew that before I got to her because the flies hadn't settled yet. They were circling, which meant she was still moving air. Barely, but moving it. I stepped down, held Cutter's rein and stood over her and took the time to look properly before I touched anything. A man my age, I was 53 then, though people have always read me for older, a man my age learns not to act before he sees. Her dress had been a green wool, or had been green once. It was torn from the neck down the back, and the cloth had been pulled apart, and what was underneath was wrong in a way that made my teeth come together hard behind my lips. Someone had used a leather strap, more than once, more than 10 times. The wounds had crusted over in the heat, and some of them had cracked open again, and there was blood dried black in the fabric, and the flies wanted that. I won't put words to the whole of it. There are things a man carries that he doesn't lay out for anyone. I crouched down, got close enough to see her face turned to the side in the dirt. She was young, younger than I'd expected from the wreck of her back. Maybe 25, dark hair, the kind that goes almost copper in the sun at the roots. Her jaw was set even in unconsciousness. I remember that. Like some part of her had decided not to come undone even when the rest of her had. I said, "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't answer, obviously. I said it again anyway. Don't ask me why. Seemed like the right thing to say into that quiet. I got my canteen and wetted my bandana, and I lifted her hair carefully off her face and touched the cloth to her lips. She stirred. Her fingers in the dirt, curled under her palm, they moved. One twitch, that was enough. I had a bedroll behind my saddle. I unstrapped it and laid it on the ground beside her. Getting her onto it was slow work, and I tried to be careful of her back, and I wasn't always successful, and she made a sound once. A small, bitten-off sound, not a cry, more like something she was containing. It put a weight in my chest that stayed there a long time after. When she was on the bedroll, I got more water into her. Tilted her head, did it slow, watched her swallow. Then I got my coat from my saddlebag. I always carry a long coat even in August because the nights out here will kill you as casual as anything. And I laid it over her front, because she needed warmth more than she needed the air, and I made sure nothing touched her back. Then I sat down in the dirt beside her, and I waited. That's what I do, I wait. I've always been the kind of man who waits. My name is Harlan Cole. That might mean something to you if you came up through the high country between the Verd River and the Mogollon Rim sometime in the 60s, 70s. Probably doesn't. I ran cattle through those hills for 20 years, worked other men's herds for 12 years before that, and I was good at it and quiet about being good at it, and neither of those things ever made a man rich or well-known. I'd had a wife, Helen. We had 9 years together, and then consumption took her in the winter of 71, and when she went I sold the small place we'd scratched out near Camp Verd and started drifting. Not looking for anything, just not able to be still. I was heading north when I found the woman. No particular reason for north. The territory contracts in summer, all the water pulls back into itself, and you follow the water north toward the high country without ever making a decision about it. I'd been 3 years drifting at that point. 3 years of working for wages, sleeping in bunkhouses with boys half my age, eating whatever the camp cook put out, and somewhere in those 3 years I'd turned into a man people stopped asking questions about. When you're 30, being quiet means something to people. They try to solve you, pry at it. When you're past 50, they take it for gloom or distance and leave you alone. I didn't mind. I'd gotten used to my own company. Her name was Myra Danforth. I learned that later. The first time she was conscious enough to talk was just before sundown. I'd moved her into the shade of the junipers, not real shade, the stingy western kind that moves around on you. And I had a small fire going because the temperature was already dropping, and I needed to clean those wounds, and I needed boiled water for it. She opened her eyes and looked at the fire, and then she found me across it. Neither of us said anything for a moment. "Where's my horse?" she said finally. Her voice was low and very careful, like she was testing whether her throat still worked. "No horse when I found you." She took that in. "Mule I had a..." "Nothing." Her jaw set again, that same set I'd seen in the dirt. "You're alone out here," I said. It wasn't a question. "I can see that. I mean, nobody's coming for you." She looked at me with those eyes, gray, a kind of pale winter-water gray, and she said, "I worked that out some time ago." I liked her for that. I don't say so lightly. I'm not a man who takes to people quickly. I told her what I needed to do with the wounds. Didn't dress it up. Told her straight that it was going to hurt badly and that she could grip something if she wanted and that I'd be as fast as I could manage. She listened to all of it with her eyes on my face. When I finished, she looked at the fire. "You done this before," she said. "Cattle mostly, men twice." "Did the men live?" "One did." She thought about that. "All right," she said. I won't say what it took out of her and me both to get through it. The boiled cloth, the picking out of debris, the binding. The fire was low and I worked by its light and by the last red edge of sky to the west. She gripped the bedroll with both hands and she made that contained sound 4 or 5 times, and once she said, very quietly, "Oh, God." And that was the only prayer either of us said that night. When it was done, she was shaking. That's shock. The body has to do something with what just happened to it, and shaking is what it does. I kept the coat over her and I put my second blanket, a rough Navajo thing, traded off a man in Hallbrook over that, and I gave her more water and I built the fire up a little. She lay there in the firelight and I sat on the other side and I smoked my pipe because it was the only thing that made sitting still feel like doing something. "You're not going to ask?" she said after a while. "Not tonight." She looked at the fire. It was my employer. I drew on the pipe. I was hired to keep house and cook for a man named Ruford Page. He has a property up the valley above the Choya Creek Fork, runs cattle. She stopped, started again, quieter. He has a temper. I knew that when I took the work. Widow with no people nearby, you take what's available. She paused. I didn't know what kind of temper. "How long ago?" "This morning." I put the pipe down. This morning. She'd been in that dirt all day. "His man rode me out here in a wagon," she said. "Page told him to take me somewhere I wouldn't be found for a while. He chose here." She said it plain, no trembling in it. Just the facts laid out one after the other, the way a person talks when they've already done their falling apart, or when they've decided they're not going to. "The man with the wagon," I said, "he just left you." After checking I couldn't walk, a beat of quiet. I could crawl, he didn't check that. That thing in my chest again, heavy and settled. I looked across the fire at her. She was watching me with those pale eyes, and her face was composed in a way that cost something. "I'm going to take you to Sawmill Creek," I said. "Town called Hardwick, about a day-and-a-half ride. They've got a woman there who does doctoring." "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask." "I can't pay you, and I won't owe anyone anything I can't repay," she said, and there was something in it that was not pride in the ordinary way. It was something older and harder. It was the thing that had kept her moving across that ground on her hands and knees in August heat. I looked at her for a moment. "You're not owing me anything," I said. "You're just riding." She didn't answer that. "Get some sleep," I said. "I'll be here." She didn't say thank you. I didn't need her to. She closed her eyes, and after a while her breathing evened out and the fire cracked, and Cutter shifted his weight behind me in the dark, and I sat up until I was sure she was sleeping. And then I sat up some more after that, watching the darkness at the edge of the firelight the way a man watches when he knows there might be something in it. That was the first night. I'm going to tell you the whole of it because the whole of it matters, not the dramatic pieces, all of it. The second morning she woke before I did, which surprised me. I opened my eyes and she was sitting up, careful, not bending at the back any more than she had to, and she had my canteen, and was drinking from it with her eyes on the eastern sky, which was going pale lemon at the horizon. I sat up. "You keep a messy camp," she said, looking at the scattered gear. "Just me here, usually." I made a fire, heated water, had coffee and hardtack and dried beef, which was not any kind of meal to offer a woman who'd been through what she'd been through, but it was what I had. She ate without complaint, all of it. That told me something about her, too. Getting her onto Cutter was a problem. She was upright and moving, but her back had stiffened in the night, and every motion that required her to twist or reach pulled at the wounds. I thought about how to do it for a few minutes, just standing there looking at the horse and then looking at her. "I can do it," she said. "I know you think you can." She looked at me. "There's a way that won't pull things," I said. "If you'll let me." She looked at me for another moment, that measuring look, then she nodded. I interlaced my hands into a step, and she put her foot in it, and I lifted smooth, and she went up, and I kept one hand at her knee until she was steady, and the whole thing took about 4 seconds, and she barely made a sound. Cutter was a gentleman about it. He always was with women. I don't know how horses know, but they do. I walked beside the horse. All day. 40 miles I could have covered if I'd ridden, but you don't cover 40 miles at a walk, and she couldn't sit on that horse at any kind of pace, so we went slow. I walked and led the rein, and mostly we were quiet. The land in that part of the territory is red and tan and bone white, and the junipers get shorter as you go north, and the sky goes very blue, the kind of blue that doesn't exist anywhere else, and we moved through it in silence, and the silence was not uncomfortable, which said something about both of us. She asked me about myself in the early afternoon, not prying matter of fact the way she did everything. I told her some of it, not all, told her about the cattle work, about Helen, about the years since. She listened without filling the pauses. When I ran down, she didn't push for more. Then she said, "I had a husband, Charles Danforth. He was a good man. Fever took him 3 years ago in New Mexico territory." "Any children?" "A son, he's with my sister in Denver." "Until I could get settled somewhere." I thought about that. A woman alone, working for wages in a place like that, with a child she'd sent away until she could make something. The shape of it. "He's 6, she said. "Thomas." "Good name." "He looks like his father." She paused. "I need to get back to him." "I know. I mean, it isn't just that I want to. I need to." "I understand you." We walked on. The sun got over us and started west, and the light changed from white to gold, and we came down out of the junipers into a broad, flat run of grama grass, and I could see the smudge of tree line along Choya Creek 5 or 6 miles off. We camped that night at the creek. Real water, real shade. I made better food. I had a paper twist of cornmeal and some dried beans I'd been saving, and I made a proper mash of it, and she ate it like it was something from a hotel dining room, with the same seriousness she gave everything. I watched her across the fire, and I thought, here is a woman who does not stop. Whatever comes, she does not stop. And I thought that was the most valuable thing in a human being, and the rarest. Her wounds needed looking at again that night. She turned from the fire without being asked, and I unwrapped the bindings and checked what needed checking, and she bore it without a word. And then I rewrapped it, and she turned back. "Thank you," she said. It was the first time she'd said it. I didn't make anything of it. I just nodded and reached for my pipe. "Harlan," she said. I looked up. "I mean it's thank you." I looked at her for a moment. The fire was between us, and the light moved on her face, and she had an expression I hadn't seen on her yet, something that wasn't composure or stoicism or that Josette thing she carried. Something quieter. Just a person, tired, with their guard put down for one moment. "You'd have gotten out on your own," I said. "Maybe. You were moving when I found you." "I was," she said. She thought about it. "But I might not have gotten far enough fast enough." I didn't answer. "Let a man do you a kindness," she said. It wasn't unkind. She said it almost to herself, like something she was telling the fire. "That's what my mother used to say." She meant it different about pride, but I think about it different. Let a man do you a kindness. Most of them have so few chances to. I smoked my pipe. The creek ran over its stones behind me. "You're not most men," she said. "I'd like you to know I know that." I put the pipe down and looked at her. She wasn't looking at me with pity or with that cautious gratitude people give when they feel they owe you and are trying to cover it. She was looking at me straight, the way she looked at everything, and what was in her face was just honest regard, clear and quiet. I hadn't been looked at that way in a long time. 3 years of drifting, bunkhouses, strangers' cattle, nobody asking and me not telling. You get used to being invisible. You tell yourself you prefer it. Maybe you do mostly. But there's a thing it does to you that you don't notice until somebody takes it away. Some long-term, slow-burning diminishment that you don't feel the weight of until the weight is lifted. "All right," I said. She smiled then. Small, quick, not the big, easy smile of a woman performing niceness. Just a real thing there and then gone. We got into Hardwick the next afternoon, which was a Wednesday. I remember Wednesday because the mercantile had its delivery day on Wednesdays, and there were wagons outside, and a handful of men loading and unloading. And they stopped what they were doing when we came down the main street, me walking and Myra Danforth on my horse. I took her to a woman named Agnes Birch, who kept a boarding house and who had a reputation for practical medicine, set bones, drew infection, mixed poultices. She'd been a nurse in the war, people said. I didn't know her. I just knew her name from having passed through Hardwick twice before. Agnes Birch looked at Myra's back and looked at me and said, "How long ago?" "Going on 3 days," I said. She nodded and told me to wait outside. I waited outside. There's a bench in front of the Hardwick boarding house, and I sat on it and I rolled a cigarette. I don't often smoke cigarettes, but I didn't want the pipe just then, and I sat with my elbows on my knees and I watched the street. Horses and wagons and a few women in bonnets, and a dog sleeping in a wheel rut, and the ordinary slow business of a Wednesday afternoon. A man from the mercantile came over, maybe 40, heavyset with a shopkeeper's hands. He said, "That woman you brought in, she hurt bad." "Some," I said. He looked at me. "Page do that." I looked at him. "Ruford Page up on the valley. Word gets around." He said it flat, not curious, more like a man confirming something he'd already suspected. "She one of his housekeepers." "Was." He was quiet a minute. "He's driven off 3 women in 2 years. Nobody does anything about it because he runs a lot of cattle and he's owed a lot of money, and that's how it works." He looked at his hands. "I don't like it. You bringing a complaint to the sheriff." I thought about Myra Danforth's face across the fire. The jaw set, the pale eyes, the small, real smile. The way she said I need to get back to him about the boy in Denver. "That's hers to decide," I said. He went back to his mercantile. Agnes Birch came out 2 hours later and sat down on the bench beside me, wiping her hands on a cloth. "She'll be all right," she said. "There'll be scarring, she knows that." "Yes." "She told me how it was about you finding her." Agnes looked at the street. "She said you didn't ask her anything that first night." "Didn't need to." "She noticed that." "I didn't say anything." "She said you told her she'd have gotten out on her own." "She would have." Agnes looked at me sideways. She was 50-odd, weathered, with eyes that had seen considerable amounts of things and made peace with most of them. "Maybe, she's strong, but they're strong and they're strong enough, and in August heat with wounds like that," she shook her head. "You gave her something." "Just a ride." "That's right," Agnes said. "Sometimes that's everything." I stayed in Hardwick 4 more days. I told myself it was because I needed to replace some tack. The right stirrup leather was cracked and needed replacing, and the hardware store had the part I wanted. That was true. It was also true that I spent time on that bench in front of Agnes Birch's boarding house and drank coffee from the cafe across the street and didn't ride on. Myra came out on the second day, carefully holding herself upright in a way that kept her back straight, wearing a dress Agnes had found her. She sat down next to me. "You're still here," she said. "Still here." She looked at the street. "I talked to the sheriff." I looked at her. "He took my statement, whether he does anything with it." She made a small motion with her hand. "There's another woman, one of the previous ones. Agnes knows her. She's willing to speak too." She paused. "I don't know if it'll come to anything." "Might," I said, "might not." "Yes," she looked at her hands in her lap. "I'm going to send for Thomas. Agnes says I can board here until I find work, and there's a family needs a cook over at the Hatch Ranch. She thinks they'd take me on." I nodded. "So I'm going to be all right," she said, not asking, telling me, telling herself maybe in the way of saying a thing aloud so it becomes true. "Yes," I said, "you are." She looked at me. "What about you?" I looked at the street. The dog had found new shade. Somewhere down the block, a woman was calling a child to come inside. Ordinary life, moving at its ordinary pace. I was thinking of going on north, I said. There's a man I used to work for up above Flagstaff, lost his foreman over the winter. He might have use for me. Might. Will, he just doesn't know it yet. She studied the side of my face. I could feel it, that steady gray-eyed attention. Harland. I looked at her. She put her hand on my arm. Just laid it there, flat and still, her hand on my forearm where my shirt sleeve was rolled back. Not a pat, not a squeeze, just the weight of her hand, warm and deliberate. I'm glad you were on that creek, she said. I looked at her hand on my arm, the shape of her fingers, the simple fact of it, that someone had put their hand on me with intention, with meaning, and wasn't in a hurry to take it back. Glad I was there too, I said. And the strange thing, the thing I've thought about since, often, is that in that moment I meant it not just about her. I meant it about the whole of it. I'd been on that creek for no reason, just going north because there was no reason not to. Moving through the world like a man who decided the world had already said its piece about him and turned away, and you don't argue with what's already been decided. And then you find someone in the dirt and you do the plain, right thing and they look at you across a fire and say you're not most men. And they say it the way they'd say the creek runs east, with no embroidery in it, just the bare true thing, and something that's been tight for a long time in your chest. Something you didn't even know was tight, goes loose. She took her hand back eventually. We sat a while longer. I rode out the next morning. Said goodbye to Agnes Birch, who pressed a bag of food into my saddlebag without asking if I wanted it, and said goodbye to Myra in front of the boarding house with the sun barely up and the street quiet and the smell of coffee coming from somewhere. She shook my hand, firm and straight the way she did everything. Come back through, she said, when you go south again. I'll do that. She looked at me a moment longer. Then she stepped back and I stepped up onto Cutter, and I rode north up the main street of Hardwick with the long, cool morning ahead of me. I didn't look back. A man my age learns not to look back at things. It pulls at something in the chest you can't afford to have pulled at. But I'll tell you this. I went north and I found the man above Flagstaff, a rancher named Gebhardt, who'd been working his cattle short-handed all spring and who gripped my hand like a drowning man grips a rope when I showed up at his gate and told him I was looking for foreman work. I spent that fall and winter running his operation and doing it well. Running cattle through high country in winter is work that strips away anything in you that isn't useful, and I had a lot of useful left, more than I'd been giving out. I came south in the spring. In May, when the high country was still cold, but the desert was warm and the Ocotillo was red. I came through Hardwick on a Thursday. Myra Danforth was behind the fence of Agnes Birch's kitchen garden, where she'd been given a corner to keep. She was planting something and she had dirt on her forearms and a boy of about 6 beside her, showing him how to press seeds into the ground with his thumb. She looked up when Cutter's hooves came up the street. She looked at me for a moment with the pale eyes, and then she stood and put her hand up, flat, and the boy looked up too and looked at me with the frank curiosity of a 6-year-old. I pulled up. Thomas, she said to the boy, this is the man I told you about. The boy looked at me with the eyes she described, dark, not like hers, his father's eyes. He assessed me seriously the way small children assess things. The one who found you, he said. Yes. He looked back at me. Did you really walk the whole way with your horse? I did. He considered that. Then he nodded, as if it confirmed something. I got down. Myra came to the fence gate and opened it, and we stood there in the May morning in Agnes Birch's garden with the boy looking between us. You came back, she said. I said I would. She looked at me with that straight, clear look. She'd filled out over the winter. She'd been thin as wire when I found her, the way people get when they're living too hard on too little. And she was standing easy and her eyes were the same, and the jaw was the same, but there was something in the rest of her that had come back to itself. The way a good piece of land will recover after drought if you give it a season and some water. I've been thinking, she said. About Gebhardt's ranch. Agnes says he's a fair man, that he pays well. That the cook's position opened up over the winter. I looked at her. Thomas is good in the mornings, she said. I'd need him at the school in Flagstaff during the week and with me on weekends. She looked at the boy who had gone back to his planting. It's a long way from where I came from, but I've been thinking it might do. I looked at the boy pressing seeds into dirt with his thumb, careful, one by one. I could speak to Gebhardt, I said. He runs a tight operation, but he's fair. He'd put you up proper. She looked at me, and you'd be there. Running the cattle, yes, most of the year. I know that's what I'm asking. I looked at her for a moment. The garden, the fence, the boy, the May light, the plain, sunlit, ordinary shape of it. You're not asking very much, I said. She smiled, not the small, quick flash from that night at the creek, but longer, fuller, something that stayed. She put her hand on the fence post between us. I think I'm asking quite a lot, actually, she said. I just think you're the kind of man who can manage it. There it was again, that thing she'd said by the fire that first time. Not most men, the bare true thing said plain. I put my hand over hers on the fence post. She didn't pull back. We stood like that for a moment in Agnes Birch's kitchen garden with the boy planting seeds at our feet, and the morning going warm around us. That was 22 years ago now. Thomas is 28. He runs cattle of his own up along the rim. Has his father's eyes and his mother's jaw and her habit of looking at you like he's working out exactly what you're made of. I don't mind. It's a good quality in a man. Myra is Myra Cole now. Has been for 20 years. She still gardens wherever we are. She still looks at me sometimes across a room with those pale winter-water eyes, and I still feel it, that loosening in the chest, that particular thing she undid in me in the firelight on Choya Creek, with a hand laid flat on my arm and the most matter-of-fact thing in the world said plain. You're not most men. I don't know about most men. I don't know what most men are or aren't. I know I found a woman in the dirt, and I did the plain right thing and didn't ask anything of her, and she gave me something back that I hadn't known I was missing. That's all there is to it. That's everything,